The room buzzed with holiday chatter and clinking glasses, but all I heard was the sickening crack of my laptop hitting the floor. Time froze as I stared at the wreckage, my lifeline shattered beyond repair. I turned sharply and caught my 9-year-old grandson's eyes, clear, cold, and unblinking. He met my gaze without a flinch. "You deserved it," he said calmly, as if those words were the simplest truth in the world. The entire moment was caught on camera. The angle, the expression, every second, etched in cold, undeniable proof. I wasted no time. I gathered everyone's attention and played the footage on the big screen, letting the evidence speak for itself. But my daughter and son-in-law just shrugged it off. "He's just a kid," they said dismissively. "Why are you making such a big deal about this?" I felt the weight of their words crush me harder than any broken device ever could. I'm Leonard Harper. And from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Have you ever had your world unravel in an instant, only to realize the people who should protect you are the ones letting you fall? This wasn't just a broken laptop. It was a fracture far deeper than technology, one that threatened to tear our family apart. And as the night's joy dissolved into silence, I knew the reckoning was only just beginning. The morning after the party, the house felt heavy, like the air itself was weighed down by unspoken truths and broken trust. I sat quietly, staring at the empty spot on the table where my laptop once rested, the ghost of its presence lingering like a bitter reminder. My grandson played nearby, his face still carrying that unsettling mix of defiance and innocence. But it wasn't just him I was watching. It was the silence that followed, the silence from his parents. My daughter and son-in-law had made their choice. They brushed off what happened as just a kid being a kid, but I heard something far worse: apathy. I tried to speak with them. "How can you defend this behavior?" I asked, my voice heavy with disappointment. My daughter looked away, a tightness around her mouth. "Leonard, he's only 9. Kids test boundaries. It's not personal." But it was personal. It was everything. The silence in response to that truth was deafening. I thought about all the years I'd worked to build a family, to create a safe place. Yet here I was, feeling like an outsider in my own home. I remembered my older brother, Frank, the steady force in our family, the man who always knew when to step in and when to stay back. I called him that morning. "Frank," I said, voice tight, "they're letting him get away with this. I don't know how much longer I can stand it." He listened quietly, then replied, "Let me handle it." As I hung up, a flicker of hope warmed the cold pit of my chest. Have you ever felt powerless in the face of betrayal, only to discover strength when you least expected it? The broken laptop was just the beginning. The real damage lay in the fractured bonds that threatened to pull us apart. But sometimes, family isn't just about blood. It's about standing up for what's right. And I was about to see just how far that truth could reach. The next morning, the house was tense in a way that no holiday gathering should ever be. The warmth of Christmas was replaced by a cold undercurrent, the kind of silence that screams louder than any argument. My grandson, oblivious to the storm his actions had ignited, played quietly in the corner. But I couldn't shake the memory of those eyes, the defiance, the coldness. It wasn't just a child's tantrum, it was a message, and it cut deeper than any words. When my older brother, Frank, arrived, I felt a flicker of relief. Frank was a man of few words but deep convictions, the kind of man who carried respect like armor. He didn't waste time. After hearing my side, he asked to see the footage. We watched the silent confession again, the boy's deliberate destruction and heartless words playing out before us. Frank's face was unreadable, but I knew I had never seen that look on him before. It was a mixture of disappointment and resolve. That evening, Frank requested a family meeting. I hesitated, knowing the fragile threads holding us together might snap. But I also knew something had to be done. When everyone gathered, Frank spoke calmly but firmly. "This isn't just about a broken laptop. It's about respect, respect for family, for each other." He didn't shout or demand. Instead, he held us accountable with quiet authority. My daughter's defenses crumbled slowly, the weight of truth settling in. Frank looked directly at my grandson and said, "Actions have consequences. When you hurt those who love you, it changes everything." That night, I saw something shift, not just in my grandson, but in all of us. The lesson wasn't just for the boy, it was for the family. Have you ever watched a fracture begin to mend, only to realize the healing is just as hard as the breaking? Because sometimes it takes a steady hand to guide us back from the edge. And sometimes it takes an older brother's wisdom to remind us what family really means. After that family meeting, something shifted beneath the surface, quiet but undeniable. The tension didn't vanish overnight, but the air was different, charged with the promise of change. My grandson avoided my gaze, the defiance replaced by a hesitant, uncertain look I hadn't seen before. It was as if he was beginning to understand the weight of his actions, though the road ahead would be long. My daughter and son-in-law, still uneasy, seemed to wrestle with their own guilt. They hadn't expected Frank's calm, yet firm words to land so hard. For once, they couldn't dismiss the situation as a harmless childhood phase. Yet, beneath their facade of control, I sense fear. Fear that their inaction might have fractured more than just a laptop or a moment of discipline. In the days that followed, I watched quietly. There were small signs, a soft apology for my grandson, a lingering glance for my daughter, a subtle shift in how we interacted. But the real test was still to come. One morning, Frank pulled me aside. "It's time to follow through," he said. "Words only carry so far. They need to see actions, consequences that stick." I nodded, understanding fully. This wasn't about punishment, it was about respect, boundaries, and healing a broken trust. Later that day, Frank confronted my daughter and son-in-law privately. I wasn't present, but the conversation was long and serious. By evening, the atmosphere in the house felt heavier, charged with the weight of reckoning. Have you ever been caught between hope and despair, wondering if the ones you love will choose to change? Because sometimes, the hardest part of family isn't the betrayal itself. It's facing the silence that follows. And I was ready to see how far they were willing to go. The days following Frank's confrontation were a test of patience and resolve. The fragile progress we had made trembled on the edge of collapse, threatened by old habits and stubborn pride. My grandson seemed caught in a battle of his own, oscillating between remorse and rebellion. His childish defiance had dimmed but had not vanished entirely. His parents, meanwhile, stood at a crossroads. I watched my daughter struggle silently, the weight of responsibility heavy on her shoulders. She knew change was necessary, but fear and denial still chained her steps. One evening, I sat with Frank on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink. "We're at a turning point," he said softly. "Either they embrace this chance to heal, or the fractures will grow wider." I nodded, feeling the truth of his words like a stone sinking deep. The house was quieter these days, the tension replaced with an uneasy calm. But beneath that calm was a simmering storm, waiting to either break or pass. That night, my grandson came to me, eyes downcast but sincere. "I'm sorry, Grandpa," he whispered. "I didn't mean to hurt you." His words were small but mighty, a first step on a long road. I placed a hand on his shoulder, feeling the fragile connection between us begin to mend. Have you ever stood at the edge of forgiveness, wondering if the bridges you build will hold? Because sometimes the path to healing begins with a single fragile word. And sometimes it requires us to choose hope over hurt. The days after my grandson's apology felt different, lighter, yet cautious. Healing wasn't a straight path, and every step forward seemed shadowed by the fear of falling back. I could see the change slowly taking root, especially in my daughter. She was more present, more willing to listen, and less defensive when I voiced my concerns. It was as if Frank's intervention had sparked a long overdue reckoning. At family dinners, the tension that once filled the air began to dissipate, replaced by tentative smiles and genuine conversations. My grandson even asked about my work, a simple gesture that felt monumental. Yet, beneath the surface, I knew this fragile piece was still being tested. Old wounds don't vanish overnight, and trust must be earned, not demanded. One afternoon, I sat down with my daughter privately. "I know it's been hard," I said quietly, "but I'm here, willing to rebuild. Together." Her eyes glistened, and for a moment, I saw the daughter I once knew, hopeful, determined. We talked late into the evening, unraveling years of pain and misunderstanding. It was painful but necessary. Have you ever faced a choice between holding onto anger or embracing the possibility of redemption? Because sometimes the greatest strength lies in forgiveness, and sometimes in the willingness to try again. That night, as I closed my eyes, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: hope. The weeks that followed were a test of endurance, for me, for my grandson, and for the entire family. Healing, I learned, wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic apologies. It was about the quiet moments, the small steps taken in the shadows. My grandson, once brash and defiant, began to show glimpses of a softer self. I caught him one afternoon gently fixing a broken ornament on the Christmas tree, his fingers trembling as if afraid to break it again. He looked up, caught my eye, and for the first time, I saw regret, not the fleeting kind, but something deeper, more lasting. My daughter started to open up, too. We spent hours talking, sometimes heated, sometimes tearful, unpacking the weight of years of silence and misunderstandings. She admitted her fears of losing control, her guilt for not stepping up sooner. It wasn't easy for her to face, but she did. One evening, after a particularly long conversation, she said softly, "I want to fix this, Dad. I want us to be a family again." Those words hung in the air, fragile but full of promise. Frank, ever the steady presence, reminded me that change takes time. "Don't expect perfection," he said, "but don't settle for less than progress." I took those words to heart. At night, I found myself reflecting on the journey, the pain, the betrayals, the quiet victories. I realized that revenge, in its purest form, wasn't about retribution. It was about reclaiming dignity, demanding respect, and finding peace within the storm. The broken laptop was a catalyst, but the true lesson was about love, its fragility, and its power to heal. Have you ever witnessed a family fractured and wondered if it could ever be whole again? Because sometimes the greatest battles are fought not with fists or fury, but with patience, understanding, and an open heart. And in that battle, I found my greatest strength. The morning light filtered softly through the curtains, casting a warm glow over a house that felt different, quieter, yet somehow alive, with new energy. It was a subtle shift, but unmistakable. The walls that once echoed with tension now hummed with tentative hope. My grandson sat across from me at the breakfast table, his eyes bright and curious. For the first time in a long while, he spoke without hesitation. "Grandpa," he said, "I want to make things right." I smiled, feeling the weight of those words settle gently in my chest. This wasn't a simple apology. It was the first step toward healing a wound that had cut deep. My daughter joined us, her expression soft and reflective. She reached out and took my hand, a silent gesture that spoke volumes. Over the following days, small moments of connection multiplied. We laughed together, shared stories, and began to rebuild the bridges that had once seemed beyond repair. Frank's words echoed in my mind: progress, not perfection. And progress we made. The broken laptop had been more than a piece of technology. It had become a symbol of what was lost, and what could be regained. Through patience, courage, and the willingness to face uncomfortable truths, we had reclaimed not just respect, but love. Have you ever stood at the edge of despair, only to find hope waiting quietly beneath? Because sometimes the most profound revenge isn't in punishment, but in rising above the pain and choosing forgiveness. As I looked around that morning at the faces of a family I thought I was losing, I realized the battle was never about destruction. It was about rebuilding, about strength, about the quiet power of second chances. And that, I knew, was the greatest victory of all.